My name is Clara Donovan, and I hold the rank of colonel in the United States Marine Corps. But to my family, I've always been nothing more than a stubborn misfit in boots. They never recognized a daughter who protected her country or a sister who advanced through grueling deployments around the world. They just saw the one who wouldn't settle down, who picked honor over holidays and missions over milestones. I hadn't spoken to my mother or sister in over 11 years. Not since the wake. Not since they pushed me to the edges in my service uniform while they arranged snapshots by Dad's casket as if it were a casual reunion. I'd quit reaching out after that. No messages, no gatherings, just the shared quiet we all maintained. Then, a month ago, an elegant invitation appeared on my desk at Marine Corps Base Quantico. A sleek ivory envelope with my name in bold. Clara Donovan. No rank, no honorific, just the plain tag they used to minimize me. The return address was Mom's home in Chicago. And the event. My younger sister Lila's wedding. She was marrying a man named Ethan Kane. That name stopped me short. Captain Ethan Kane, a Navy SEAL I'd extracted during a high-risk raid in Yemen back in 2018. I'd led the helicopter assault team that airlifted his squad from a compound under siege, dodging RPG fire with rotors screaming and dust choking the night. I still carry the tinnitus from the explosions. I stared at the envelope for ages. My executive officer thought it was junk mail. The team in my office went quiet. But it wasn't the card that hit hard. It was the scribbled note inside, in Mom's sharp handwriting. Conduct yourself properly. No welcome, no affection, just a caution. Like I was a risk to their showcase. I didn't respond. No confirmation. I just arranged a commercial hop and kept my arrival low profile. I didn't go for praise. I didn't aim to mend fences. I went to stand as I was. Not in chiffon, not with pasted grins. As the woman they'd rejected, the relative they'd ridiculed, the Marine they'd ignored. What I didn't foresee was the groom addressing the crowd, disclosing my role before the toasts wrapped. And when he did, when he called me out by title before 150 attendees and recounted our joint op, Lila's poise crumbled. That was when their scorn ended. That was when they faced who I'd really become. The wedding card sat untouched on my desk for 5 days before I revisited it. There was a deliberate edge to how they'd printed my name, Clara Donovan. No colonel, no nod to my eagles, like a calculated omission from our lineage. Not even a "we miss you" or "please join us." Just Mom's terse addition. Conduct yourself properly. Her classic line for muting me, for guaranteeing I wouldn't shatter the illusion. My quarters at Quantico were still that afternoon. The brass had dispersed for drills. I stood by the viewport, gazing at the parade grounds where recruits marched in sync. My dress uniform dangled in the wardrobe, creased perfectly, a symbol of endless inspections. The overhead lights droned softly. That's when Brigadier General Reyes rapped once firmly, then entered without pause. She never stood on ceremony. She'd guided me through enough ops to detect my distraction. She spotted the envelope immediately. Of course, intel had reached her. "Going?" she asked, tone even. "Not sure." She claimed a seat, legs crossed, palms pressed together. "Your sister?" I nodded. "To Kane?" "Another." Reyes whistled low. "The Yemen extract 2018. You helmed the helo team, got his SEALs out when the compound was lit up. Took incoming to your bird. Solid work." My response was flat. Ears still ring from it. The pause was comfortable. The type operators share where subtext suffices. "Really considering?" She probed softer. I looked away. Unclear what they want. Absolution, maybe, or my tame attendance. She shifted forward. "Withhold it. Attend on your terms. You've claimed the right to hold ground without retreat." I let it sink in, then dipped my chin. That night, I booked a civilian flight to O'Hare under an alias. Casual wear for travel. Told no one, not my driver. Not aides, not Reyes. The plane was sparse, aisles echoing. I took a window, paid to vacant the next. The flight attendant noticed my challenge coin on my keychain and comped a soda. I took it black. Over the Great Plains, I shut my lids, not for slumber, but to brace. This wasn't a raid, but kinda terrain without grids. We landed pre-dawn. O'Hare was clinical, efficient. My creds sped processing. No bags. All in a duffel, uniform bagged neatly. Outside, Chicago's chill bit, whined off Lake Michigan whipping like a reminder of home's harsh edges. I grabbed a taxi. No convoy, no detail, just the interstate I'd once driven as a teen, when I confused Mom's chill for fatigue, not tactics. At her townhouse in Lincoln Park, I paused at the stoop. Fresh mulch in beds, wrought iron gate oiled, all immaculate a monument to polish. The door opened to Patricia Donovan in pressed khakis and a cashmere sweater worth my gear bag. Her bob was flawless. She scanned me like a sentry. "You got it then," she noted. "Yes. I assume you packed appropriately. Uniforms in." Her jaw tightened. "Don't disrupt, Clara. This is Lila's spotlight." I held her stare. Why summon the family black sheep? She moved aside silently, admitting me. The play began. The townhouse was unchanged. Herbal diffusers on surfaces. Crystal lamp in the hall with no dust mote daring. Even the hush seemed staged, like a briefing room pre-command. Lila wasn't there on arrival blessing. Patricia showed me the spare with detached courtesy. "Low-key affair," she said, keying the lock. "Rehearsal tomorrow night. Vows next day. Be attired and placed early." "No family escort?" I asked mildly. She stopped. "Not in the party. Expected." The room was pristine gray tones, starched bedding, a single fern like a token truce. I dropped my duffel. Hung the uniform shrouded. Skipped settling. Short stay. That evening, rehearsal at a chic loft in the West Loop overlooked the skyline, twinkling like stars on a nav chart. The spot screamed refinement. Exposed brick? Calligraphy placeholders. Mine C. Donovan no frills at the back near the bar, where ice clinks drowned chatter. I sat composed. The venue pulsed with easy talk. Mom directed like a CO, tweaking stems and glasses. Lila swept in delayed, in blush satin, shining like she'd claimed every bulb. She glanced my way once, then hugged a cousin with a shriek that stung. Toasts with Prosecco. "To ties," a guest said. "To Lila and Ethan," another. "To restarts," Patricia added. Eyes grazing me. No hello for Clara. No probes on my decade plus in the Corps. The only hint. A former general at Patricia's side. He eyed me. "Familiar face," he muttered. Patricia cut in. "Clara's in admin now. Global stuff. Always moving." "Admin?" Lila smirked. "She watches desks overseas. Probably." Chuckles spread. I eyed my fork shiny, even, inert. Held quiet. But the general's look changed. "Yemen 2018? Operation Silent Wave?" I confirmed. "Yes, sir." He started more, but Patricia shifted. "Dessert choices?" I drank water, cool and pure. In the artifice, a split showed. Memory dawned. The morning of the wedding dawned with a thick blanket of Chicago's infamous summer haze, the kind that hung low over the city like a persistent fog of war, diffusing the sunlight into a muted glow that filtered through the tall, arched windows of the historic chapel in Hyde Park. Lila had selected this venue for its timeless, romantic appeal, Gothic stone arches rising like sentinels, heavy oak doors etched with centuries of history, and leaded glass windows that cast fragmented rainbows across the polished wooden pews when the light hit just right. It was the epitome of curated elegance, everything in perfect alignment except for my place within it. I had arrived as instructed, well before the influx of guests. Patricia's voice echoing in my mind like a pre-op briefing. Stay subtle. Fade into the background. No unnecessary flares. Yet I had donned my full-dress uniform regardless, not as an act of defiance, but as a quiet assertion of the stripes and stars I'd earned through dust-choked raids and sleepless nights in forward operating bases. Each ribbon on my chest represented a chapter of sacrifice, a testament to the paths I'd chosen when family ties had frayed. Stepping into the vestibule, the air was already thick with the scent of fresh lilies and polished wood, the floral arrangements towering like ornate barricades along the walls. The seating chart was displayed on an ornate stand, names inscribed in flowing gold script on heavy vellum paper, assignments handed out like classified clearances to an exclusive club. I scanned the list methodically, once for confirmation, twice for certainty. No Clara Donovan, no Colonel Donovan listed among the prime spots near the front. Then I spotted it, scribbled in the lower margin like a last-minute addendum. Row 15, rear aisle. I almost allowed myself a wry smile at the predictability of it all. It was so characteristically Patricia, relegating the problem to the periphery where it couldn't disrupt the central narrative. She swept past moments later, a vision in flowing silk that whispered of high-end boutiques, her expression one of feigned warmth as she greeted early arrivals. Row 15 for you, she murmured without breaking stride, her tone clipped but polite, as if directing a subordinate. I offered no response, simply proceeding into the nave and claiming my assigned bench at the back, where the haze outside seemed to seep in, muting the colors and sounds just enough to create a sense of detachment. The pews began to fill gradually, guests trickling in like reinforcements arriving at a rally point. Whispers of conversation blending with the rustle of programs, the subtle drift of expensive perfumes and colognes, the glint of jewelry catching the diffused light. Groomsmen in tailored tuxedos fluttered about, adjusting boutonnieres and posing for the photographers who snapped away at candid moments that were anything but spontaneous. Ethan stood at the altar, impeccable in his civilian suit. Though I knew from his posture alone that he carried the bearing of a SEAL, spine straight, eyes scanning the room with habitual vigilance. Our gazes intersected for a brief instant as he turned slightly. There was a flicker in his expression recognition, perhaps a shadow of gratitude from that chaotic night in Yemen. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the pageantry around him. Lila's entrance was nothing short of theatrical, her train sweeping the aisle like a conqueror's banner, the organ music swelling to fill the space with dramatic chords. The congregation rose as one, a sea of admiring faces, and she shimmered under the haze-softened light, every inch the radiant bride. Me? I remained seated, a solitary figure in the rear, unnoticed amid the collective awe. When the minister invited immediate family forward for a special unity blessing, a moment of prayer and candle lighting meant to symbolize enduring bonds, I rose by sheer reflex, my boots silent on the carpeted floor. The words immediate family echoed in my ears, stirring a muscle memory from countless formations where unity was drilled into us as survival. But before I could take a single step toward the altar, Patricia's hand brushed my sleeve light as a whisper, but firm as a restraint. "This moment isn't your turn," she hissed under her breath, her voice coated in that almost maternal sweetness that masked the command. Almost kind, but not quite. I paused, locking eyes with her for a heartbeat, then shifting my gaze to the front where Lila knelt beside Ethan, the man whose team I'd airlifted from a crumbling compound in Yemen's rugged hills back in 2018. Rotors straining against the night wind, explosions ringing in my ears like perpetual thunder. The memory surged unbidden. The heat of the desert, the acrid smoke from RPG impacts, my helo team pushing the birds to their limits to extract those seals before the enemy overran them. Success had come at a price tinnitus that still haunted quiet nights. A co-pilot sidelined with injuries, but family had never asked about those details. They fixated on the absences, the missed birthdays and holidays, labeling them as selfish detours. I reseated myself without a word, the blessing proceeding as if I were a ghost in the room, invisible and unacknowledged. The reception shifted to the adjacent chapel gardens, a lush expanse of manicured lawns and blooming rose bushes under the hazy Chicago sky, tents erected like temporary command posts to shelter the tables from any potential drizzle. My assigned spot was tucked behind a wall of climbing ivy near the service entrance, where the clatter of kitchen staff and the scent of grilling meats wafted through intermittently. The place card read, C. Donovan in diminutive font, the silverware subtly mismatched from the pristine sets at the central tables, a small but telling oversight. The server bypassed my goblet when pouring the initial round of champagne, his eyes skimming a list before shaking his head. Dry guest designation, he explained curtly. I didn't bother correcting him. Instead, I procured a flute from an unattended cart nearby, pouring my own measure of sparkling water to maintain clarity amid the festivities. Across the garden, Lila twirled and posed for endless photos, her laughter carrying like a signal flare, Ethan at her side with a hand resting lightly on her back, a gesture of possession and protection. Neither glanced my way, but intuition, honed from years of reading battlefield cues, whispered that a shift was imminent, the air thick with unspoken tensions. The microphone moment arrived like an ambush under the soft glow of hanging lanterns, the haze now deepening into twilight as Lila took center stage in the garden's heart. She held a flute in one hand, the mic in the other, her gown flowing with every graceful movement, commanding the space as if born to it. To lasting bonds and unbreakable love, she cooed. Her voice modulated for maximum charm, rehearsed to perfection. To family, to devotion. She paused dramatically, letting the words hang before pivoting her gaze toward my secluded table. Even my big sister managed to show up, all the way from whatever remote desk she's pushing papers at these days, still minding those crucial filing cabinets, I suppose. Snickers dotted the crowd like scattered fire, light at first but gaining momentum. Lila's grin widened, feeding off the energy. Let's raise a glass to the steadfast paper pusher in our midst, the one who keeps the bureaucracy safe. The laughter heated up, warmer now, though a few guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting. But no one intervened. Then Patricia chimed in, her voice crisp and cutting like a well-aimed shot. She might be our family's shame, but at least she's punctual. That ignited the full roar, the garden tipping into amusement as conversations halted mid-sentence, glasses suspended in mid-air. I rose slowly, not in a flurry of anger, not flustered like a recruit under fire, but deliberately, like a calculated advance through hostile terrain. The shift was palpable. Heads turned, the laughter dying out in uneven waves. Lila tilted her head, her expression a mix of mock innocence and challenge. Oh, come on, it's just a joke, Clara. Loosen up, you've always been so stiff and serious. Before I could formulate a response, Ethan moved. He stepped forward with the steady precision of an operator navigating a kill zone, weaving through the sea of tables and startled guests without haste or hesitation. Photographers pivoted, flashes popping like distant artillery. Breaths were held collectively as he reached my position and halted one measured pace away. Then, with the formality drilled into every service member, he executed a crisp salute not to a family member, not to a mere guest, but to a superior officer. "Colonel," he said, his voice ringing clear and unwavering across the garden. "Please forgive my bride's misunderstanding." He turned to address the assembly, his tone commanding attention. "This is Colonel Clara Donovan, my former commander in the Marine Corps. She didn't just serve, she led the helicopter assault that saved my SEAL team and me during a raid in Yemen. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here today." Gasps rippled through the crowd, audible and tangible, like the collective intake of breath before a storm breaks. The scripted elegance of the reception unraveled in that instant, the haze overhead seeming to thicken with the weight of revelation. Lila's hand trembled visibly. The microphone slipped from her fingers, striking the flagstone path with a dull, echoing thud that punctuated the silence. She collapsed back into a nearby chair, her face drained of all color, the bridal veil slipping slightly as if in defeat. Patricia stood frozen a few feet away, her mouth opening and closing without sound, finally managing a broken whisper of my name that carried no further than her lips. And me? I didn't blink, didn't flinch. Years of command had taught me to hold the line when everything else crumbled. The shadows of the past lingered in that moment, stretching back to my enlistment at 19, fresh from the gritty streets of Chicago's South Side, driven by a calling that family dinners had never ignited. Patricia had dismissed it as a passing fad, a rebellion against the life she mapped out: marriages to stable professionals, children in private schools, suburban comfort in Lincoln Park. Lila, the perennial favorite, had echoed her with teasing jabs about playing Marine while she pursued social media fame and influencer deals. Dad, before his sudden heart attack, had been my quiet ally, slipping me military history books under the table during those tense meals, his eyes twinkling with unspoken pride. His wake 11 years ago had been the fracture point. Me in full dress uniform, relegated to the edges as they orchestrated photos by the casket like it was a networking event. No acknowledgement of my recent promotion to captain or the deployments that had shaped me. Just Patricia's curt directive: "Don't make this about you." That silence had calcified into a decade of distance, broken only by this invitation, a summons laced with caution. Now, as the reception tentatively resumed, with servers circulating trays that few touched, and the band striking up a subdued melody, those shadows began to dissipate. Ethan lowered his salute but remained at my side, a solid presence amid the murmurs. "I should have spoken up sooner," he admitted quietly, his eyes scanning the crowd as if assessing threats. "But some ops are better left classified until they're not." I nodded subtly. Timing is everything in the field. And here, guests began approaching in small waves, their earlier amusement replaced by curiosity and respect handshakes from veterans, questions about Yemen that I answered with measured detail, avoiding classified edges. One elderly gentleman, a Korean war vet with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve, gripped my arm. "We need more like you holding the fort," he rasped. "Don't let the civilians dim your fire." His words landed like a resupply drop, replenishing something I'd long thought depleted. Patricia attempted to reclaim the narrative, circulating with renewed vigor, but her efforts fell flat. Guests' attention had pivoted, the garden's atmosphere forever altered. Lila, recovering her composure with the help of her bridesmaids, avoided my vicinity entirely, her laughter now forced and infrequent. As twilight deepened, the haze giving way to a star-speckled sky, I slipped to the garden's edge, overlooking a small fountain where water trickled in soothing patterns. Reflections danced on the surface, mirroring the evening's chaos. Lila's barbs like incoming fire, Ethan's salute the counterstrike, the cascade of gasps the fallout. It wasn't vindication I felt, but a recalibration, a shift where the past's shadows no longer loomed as large. 3 months later, addressing a packed auditorium at the Pentagon, I channeled that shift into action. In civilian attire, no insignia on display, I stood at the podium and voiced truths silenced too long. "We have protocols for battlefield injuries," I began, my voice amplified across rows of attentive faces. "For loss, for trauma, but what about the wounds inflicted by those closest to us? Not by enemies, but by family dismissals that strike at the core." The audience leaned in, a mix of officers, policymakers, and advocates. I introduced the Vanguard Network, a national support system for service members undermined at home, counseling for eroded trust, programs to rebuild fractured relationships, resources to combat isolation from siblings. Spouse, parents. Sometimes the deepest scar is the betrayal of support, I emphasized. "We can't pretend those don't bleed." I named no names. Lila's mockery, Patricia's reinforcements, but the media connected the dots from wedding leaks, headlines blaring Marine Colonel's family drama fuels new vet initiative. I let it spread, a ripple turning into a wave. Retirement followed seamlessly. No fanfare, just a quiet exit and relocation to a ranch in Montana's Rocky Mountains, where open skies stretched like endless flight paths. There, amid rolling hills and whispering pines, I rediscovered sketching. pencil studies of helicopters slicing through storms, vistas of snow-capped peaks that echoed the resilience I'd built. No walls lined with medals. Instead, a simple studio with natural light, a place for unedited self-expression. One crisp autumn day, a neighboring rancher dropped by with fresh produce and curiosity. "Heard you're a colonel," he said, eyeing my easel. "That Yemen stuff real?" I poured coffee and shared fragments. The raids, the wedding pivot, the network born from personal strife. "True enough," I replied. "But the real mission is standing tall when the ground shifts." He left with a thoughtful nod, leaving me to the vast Montana horizon. Patricia never apologized. Leela stayed distant, but reports trickled in subtle changes in how they spoke my name, with hesitation and a newfound care. Not from affection, but from the inescapable truth. Erasure was no longer an option. That was the quiet victory, forged in shadows now banished by light. The days preceding the wedding had been a montage of unresolved frictions, my low-profile flight into Chicago stirring ghosts of Yemen, the 2018 intensity, leading the Hilo assault under cover of darkness, evading enemy locks while extracting Ethan's pinned seals. Rotors thrashed against sandblasts. Success tainted by lingering tinnitus and a teammate's permanent grounding. Family never delved. They harped on my detours. The skipped events deemed selfish. In the townhouse's spare room, I unpacked sparingly, the uniform hanging like a vigilant guard. Patricia's communications were terse. Schedules for meals. Timelines for events. Lila's first appearance that afternoon was brief. She breezed in from final fittings, offering a curt nod before diving into calls with vendors. No embrace, no curiosity about my core life, just the solidified chill of years-long disconnection. They held their tongues not from restraint, but because any spoken word now would cement their misdeeds into permanence, an admission etched in the evening's lingering haze. I maintained my composure, standing there with the same unyielding posture I'd adopted during endless debriefs in dimly lit bunkers, where outcomes were dissected and lessons hardened into resolve. Ethan remained positioned at my side, his back straight as a rifle barrel, a SEAL's discipline shining through even in this garden of fractured pretenses. The atmosphere didn't require further escalation. It seeped into every guest, every blooming rosebush, every untouched flute of champagne that sat sweating on the tables. Then came the secondary surge, building like reinforcements arriving at a hot LZ. It started from a prominent table near the string quartet. An older gentleman rose deliberately, his chair scraping softly against the stone path. General Hale, retired Marine Corps commander who'd overseen operations in the Persian Gulf back in the 92nd. He snapped a salute that was as precise as the day he'd pinned on his stars. Colonel Donovan, his voice carried across the garden like a parade ground command. An honor long overdue. The gesture wasn't isolated for long. A woman in a crimson gown, ex-Captain Mills, I'd learn later, a logistics specialist turned defense contractor, stood next, her salute measured and resolute, as if rendering honors at a formal ceremony. Then a third, a former intelligence officer from Joint Special Ops, his form impeccable despite the civilian tux. The chapel gardens, with their neatly trimmed hedges and softly glowing lanterns strung like perimeter lights, seemed to hold a collective breath. Non-military guests exchanged bewildered glances, but even they sensed the pivot, the air growing dense with a respect that overshadowed the prior ridicule. Lila's bridesmaids continued to hover around her, waving improvised fans from linen napkins and murmuring comforts, but her eyes stayed glued to the ground, refusing to meet mine. Patricia, my mother, attempted to wrest back control, weaving through the tables with a manufactured buoyancy that verged on frantic. "Please, let's not lose the celebratory spirit," she urged, her pitch elevated and trembling slightly, betraying the crack in her armor. But her pleas landed like dud grenades, ineffective and ignored. No one was following her lead anymore. The salutes persisted in waves, each one a subtle jab at the facade she'd meticulously upheld for years. I stayed rooted in my spot, absorbing the scene without uttering a syllable. Internally, Memories flickered like grainy helmet cam footage, enlisting at 19 from Chicago's tough neighborhoods, fueled by a purpose that family gatherings never sparked. Mom had branded it a temporary rebellion, a deviation from her blueprint of weddings to reliable types, kids in upscale schools, and comfortable lives in upscale enclaves like Lincoln Park. Lila, always the spotlight stealer, had parroted her with snide remarks about pretend soldiering while chasing likes on social media and brand deals. Dad, prior to his fatal cardiac event, had been my covert supporter, sliding me tactical manuals under the table amid strained dinners, his gaze holding quiet encouragement. His wake 11 years earlier marked the rupture, me in service dress, shunted to the margins as they staged photos by the casket like a corporate mixer. No mention of my ascent to major or the high-stakes insertions I'd led. Just Mom's clipped order. Keep it from becoming your show. That void had solidified into over a decade of estrangement, pierced only by this invitation of veiled command wrapped in propriety. Now, as the reception inched forward with servers tentatively offering platters that went largely ignored, I felt a subtle unburdening. Not outright triumph, but a realignment. Ethan checked on Lila briefly, striding over to her chaise where she now sat with regained pallor but diminished sparkle. He bent low, whispering something inaudible, and she nodded weakly, though her peek toward me carried a novel edge, not pure animosity, but a hint of disquiet, as if truly seeing me anew. Returning, he spoke sotto voce. She didn't have the complete briefing on Yemen. I compartmentalized it. Figured it was operational security. I raised an eyebrow. Compartmentalized? That's code for sidestepping. He grimaced faintly. Valid critique. But this evening recalibrates everything. The night deepened beneath Chicago's urban stars, twinkling like distant signal flares over the hazy skyline. Conversations splintered. Some groups dissected the disclosure with animated hush. Others veered to neutral ground like the chapel's architectural legacy or the garden's heirloom roses. I handled a handful of interactions, firm handshakes, shared operational anecdotes from those with service backgrounds. An older woman, adorned with a silver star brooch on her shawl, approached with moist eyes. My grandson was in Somalia, she shared softly. Lost an arm to a roadside device. Commanders like you. They inspire belief in the system. I listened attentively, providing a restrained nod of solidarity, the moment transcending personal grievances. Patricia patrolled the outskirts, her redirections growing increasingly feeble. She finally converged on me as the quartet transitioned to a gentle waltz, the dance area filling hesitantly with pairs. Clara, she intoned, a fusion of entreaty and reproach. You've certainly made your mark. Maybe we can address this discreetly tomorrow? Over brunch? I remained silent, allowing the pause to weigh heavy. She twisted her hands, the pearls around her neck now seeming like a noose. There's chatter now from attendees, even a society columnist who caught wind. Images spreading. A concise clarification could set things right, for the clan's reputation. The boldness nearly elicited a chuckle. Set right the story you constructed by omitting me? Reducing my tours to admin work for your convenience? Her poise fractured, eyes shimmering. We weren't equipped for the entirety. Your realm felt so detached. We missed the magnitude. You didn't miss it. You opted out, I countered calmly. Indifference was deliberate. She looked away. It wasn't aimed at you personally. That's the crux it ought to have been. Family is inherently personal. She fell mute. No remorse surfacing, and I didn't linger for it. Turning, I halted at the garden's ivy arch. Patricia, I've maneuvered through hazards alone for half my existence to spare your unease. That phase concludes here. I departed, abandoning the niche never designed for me. 3 months after the vows, I addressed a symposium beneath the Pentagon's vaulted ceilings. In tailored civies, devoid of decorations, I gripped the lectern and articulated verities suppressed far too long. We possess guidelines for frontline traumas, I commenced. Voice projected to the assembly of cadets, retirees, and officials. For bereavement, for strain, but what of the strikes from our inner circles, not adversaries overseas, but kin at home who undermine with words and omissions? Listeners inclined forward, a tide of focused visages. I debuted the Vanguard Network, a countrywide framework for personnel sabotaged domestically, not via combat, but through derision, detachment, denials from relatives, partners, origins. At times, the injury is fidelity shattered, I asserted. We must halt the pretense that such damages are negligible. I refrained from naming Lila. Needless. Press pieced the puzzle from circulated snaps and attendee leaks. I permitted the accounts to propagate unchecked. Instead, I withdrew from the limelight. Retired unobtrusively, acquired a ranch amid Montana's Rockies, and revived my sketching. No citations mounted, merely mountain gusts, a weathered drafting station, and the rendition of myself no one had redrafted. One brisk fall morning, a local ranch hand delivered supplies and lingered curiously. "Word is you're a colonel," he remarked, glancing at my pad. I brewed coffee. Affirmative. But crucially, I never ceased advocating for essentials. He departed reflectively. Within, I surveyed the expansive ranges. Mom issued no regrets. Lila extended no olive branch. Yet nowadays, when they utter my name, it's with deliberation. They assess it. They articulate it cautiously, not from abrupt fondness but because erasure is futile, and that constitutes the subdued equity I never vocalized. The prelude to the ceremony had amalgamated strains. My incognito touchdown in Chicago roused specters of Yemen, the 2018 fervor, helming the assault squadron, rotors contending with gales as we hauled Ethan's unit from the besieged site. Evading projectiles, triumph marred by enduring auditory echoes and a comrade's enduring discharge. Kin never inquired. They dwelled on my absences, deeming them egotistical. In the townhouse guest quarters, I stowed minimally, uniform poised like a watchdog. Patricia's exchanges were succinct, dining itineraries, occasion chronologies. Lila's debut sighting that afternoon was transient. She glided in from adjustments, proffering a brusque inclination before submerging in supplier dialogues. No clasp. No interest in my Marine tenure. Merely the congealed frost of protracted severance. The rehearsal at the West Loop loft had intensified the subterranean currents. The locale exuded urban sophistication. Panoramic vistas of the glittering skyline, vines draping exposed beams like disciplined arrays. Twilight bathed everything in a golden sheen, but the warmth eluded me entirely. Positioned at the rear table, I observed the proceedings unfold, toasts riddled with private jests, narratives that conveniently bypassed my saga. When Lila narrated family anecdotes, she omitted my enlistment, framing it as Clara's detour phase. Giggles ensued, yet the general's prior inquiry persisted, planting seeds of skepticism. After the meal, beneath the ambient illumination, Ethan approached surreptitiously. "Colonel," he uttered lowly, gaze conveying depths. "Didn't anticipate your presence." The summons arrived. He inclined his head. Gratitude for Yemen. Altered trajectories. Before expansion, Lila beckoned him off. The interchange, concise, alluded to fissures beneath the gloss. Morning ushered in the whirlwind of preparations. I attired in dress blues, entering the chapel amid aromatic florals and introductory melodies. Row 15 served as banishment, yet I preserved bearing. As pledges were swapped, Ethan's subtle nod during the band exchange conveyed unspoken appreciation amid the orchestrated romance. The garden reception underscored my solitude until the microphone shattered the veneer. Lila's taunts landed like suppressive volleys, Patricia's amplification the reinforcing barrage. My ascent was calibrated, Ethan's progression the fulcrum. His salute impeccable, proclamation resonant. Colonel Clara Donovan, my erstwhile leader. She orchestrated the aerial rescue that extricated us from peril in Yemen. The enclave hushed, then inhalations surged, Lila wavering, mic clattering. Patricia petrified, the blueprint demolished. In the subsequent hours, murmurs evolved into endorsements. Salutes from ex-servicemen. Grasps from laypersons. The loft's prior sophistication now encased an emergent chronicle, with me at its nucleus. As obscurity intensified, I contemplated during the cab ride, celestial points resembling remote beacons, equity not proclaimed, but subtly enforced. The rehearsal dinner at the chic loft in Chicago's West Loop had played out like a meticulously rehearsed drill, every element refined to a gloss. Yet the simmering frictions lurked just beneath, poised for the slightest trigger to ignite. The venue embodied urban sophistication, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering skyline, exposed brick walls draped with cascading vines that mimicked orderly ranks under ambient lighting. Twilight cast a warm golden hue over the long communal tables laden with artisanal platters, cured meats, heirloom salads, and decanters of small-batch wines from nearby vineyards. Guests clustered in animated groups, their chatter rising like background static on a comms line. But for me, positioned at that rear table near the bar station, it was akin to monitoring from a forward observation post, detached, vigilant, perpetually alert for incoming. I had driven to the loft in a nondescript rental car, weaving through the city's gridlocked streets with the precision I'd apply to navigating a helo through urban canyons. The journey allowed time for mental fortification, bracing against the anticipated slights. Patricia had messaged that morning. Formal attire. Clara. Integrate seamlessly. But I opted for a tailored black pantsuit, my only nod to civilian dress, with my Marine Corps pin discreetly affixed like a subdued emblem. Pulling into the underground garage amid luxury sedans and SUVs, I shouldered my duffel uniform still secured inside and ascended via the freight elevator to maintain a low profile. The loft's air greeted me with notes of aged oak and fresh herbs, a stark contrast to the rotor wash and cordite of my typical arenas. Within the expansive space, the vibe thrummed with refined vitality. Place cards guided attendees to their positions, mine inscribed. C. Donovan in flowing cursive, relegated to the back where the clink of glassware from the bar overshadowed subtler exchanges. I took my seat methodically, smoothing the napkin as if calibrating controls before takeoff. My tablemates were peripheral kin and associates, an uncle from Milwaukee who dimly recalled me as the traveler, a distant cousin droning about market trends. No one delved deeper. Surface-level banter was the protocol here. Patricia commanded from the head table, fine-tuning candle placements and signaling sommeliers with understated gestures. Her ensemble a blend of linen and pearls that screamed understated affluence. Lila made her entrance with calculated delay, 20 minutes past schedule to amplify the drama, her blush satin dress gliding like a silken drape. She navigated the room with air kisses and effusive hugs, drawing squeals from her entourage. When her eyes briefly swept my direction, it was a mere flicker acknowledgement eclipsed by aversion before she pivoted to embrace an aunt with theatrical zeal. Her chortle sliced the atmosphere, keen and staged, resonating like a minor disruption in formation. Toasts commenced shortly, stems ringing in harmony. Two unbreakable connections, a best man declared robustly. To Lila and Ethan, the ideal pair, another responded. Patricia contributed her own, elevating her glass. To new chapters and familial harmony. Her glance skimmed toward me, embedding a subtle admonition, yet she evaded direct engagement. No salutation for Clara. No curiosities about my 11-plus years in the Corps. It was as though my prolonged absence had expunged me from the chronicle. The lone fissure in the veneer emerged from that ex-general at Patricia's flank, a grizzled veteran with a rack of medals subtly visible beneath his blazer. He scrutinized me during the appetizer round, utensil suspended. "You ring a bell," he grumbled across the divide, his timbre bearing the weight of someone who'd directed battalions. Patricia interposed fluidly, inclining with a confidential murmur. Clara handles administrative roles, now international oversight, perpetual mobility. The general's forehead creased. Administrative? Lila, catching the exchange, interjected with a smirk that clashed with her luminous cosmetics. Oh, she supervises paperwork hubs abroad, we presume. Very under the radar. Mild guffaws circulated the table, the sort that veiled awkwardness with decorum. My attention drifted to the steak knife on my plate, polished alloy, impeccably weighted, wholly innocuous in this setting. I refrained from rebuttal. Reticence served as my barrier. But the general's demeanor evolved, cogs engaging behind his gaze. Yemen, 2018. Operation Silent Wave, the helo extraction under fire? I locked eyes affirmatively. Correct, sir, commanded the assault wing. He leaned to expound, likely on the ops' renown, but Patricia diverted masterfully. Regarding the entree selections, shall we explore the Cabernet Franc? I savored my water, the fluid crisp and anchoring, infused with faint citrus from the local filtration. In that instant, amidst the fabricated refinement, a discreet rift had materialized. They weren't articulating it yet, but reminiscence was awakening, akin to an initial ping on a sonar display heralding approach. The meal advanced. Entrees of seared scallops and herb, crusted rack of lamb, confections of molten lava cakes flambéed at the tables. Dialogues swirled around me, family lore anecdotes that artfully omitted my segment Lila's viral campaigns in New York, Patricia's philanthropy soirees, Dad's former enterprise triumphs before his collapse. When Lila rose for an ad-libbed address, expressing gratitude for the support, she glossed over distant relatives with a poignant exhale, her eyes evading mine completely. It pricked, but I isolated it, much like suppressing fatigue on extended patrols. After dinner, as patrons drifted to the rooftop terrace for cigars and nightcaps, the loft's evening breeze cooled, bearing the urban aroma of concrete and distant lake. I hovered at the margins, cradling a herbal tea, when Ethan drew near unobtrusively. He'd been anchored at the forefront, the consummate captain in his bespoke attire. But now he traversed the throng with the stealthy efficacy of a covert insertion. Colonel Donovan, he intoned quietly, halting at a deferential interval, voice pitched to elude listeners. I hadn't projected your attendance. I tilted my head. The directive reached my station. He assented, his countenance a meld of appreciation and tension. On Yemen 2018. Your Helo Squadron's insertion preserved my team. We were compromised, no exfil without your unit's daring maneuvers. Never adequately expressed thanks. Before I could elaborate, Lila's timbre summoned from the terrace. Ethan, love. Come greet Cousin Marcus. He paused, then proffered a swift salute understated, yet profound. More discourse tomorrow. As he withdrew, the dialogue lingered, succinct but laden, intimating the crevices beneath the sheen. The return drive to the townhouse was solitary, headlights piercing the hazy avenues, my thoughts replaying the night like a post-mission analysis. Patricia's evasions, Lila's smirks. The general's identification, they were markers on a chart steering toward clash. In the guest quarters, I suspended my dress uniform in readiness, insignias aligned, boots buffed to a sheen. Slumber arrived sporadically, visions interspersed with desert incursions and kin suppers, merging into a dreamlike fog. Dawn heralded escalation, the nuptial day looming like a critical engagement. At the historic chapel in Hyde Park, the rite's splendor contrasted the rehearsal's veiled strains. The edifice, with stonework from the 1,802nd and spires enduring urban sprawls, evoked enduring fortitude. Attendees converged in droves, clad in neutrals and silks, the ambiance scented with incense from the sanctuary and vibrant petals lining each row. I adhered to directives, arriving prematurely in full dress not to incite, but to validate. The seating schematic consigned me to row 15, rear aisle, an annotation of reluctance. Patricia glided by in her silk array, noting my locale sans remark, her priority on directing dignitaries. The procession was impeccable, attendants in harmonized attire, petal scatterers like parade confetti. Lila's advent elicited unified inhalations, her veil a lace torrent, her beam luminous beneath the stained hues. Ethan, at the forefront, resolute and composed, our stares crossing fleetingly a glint of awareness, possibly remorse for the unvoiced chronicle. As oaths were interchanged, a discreet nod from him amid the ring ritual spoke volumes, an implicit homage within the scripted union. The garden reception accentuated my seclusion until the mic fractured delusions. Lila's quips struck like targeted ordnance, Patricia's endorsement the ensuing volley. My elevation was gauged, but Ethan's progression? A comprehensive disclosure, salute pristine, acclamations surging like reinforcements in alignment. In the ensuing spans, murmurs transmuted to advocacy. Homages from retirees, clasps from non-combatants. The loft's antecedent polish now enveloped a nascent saga, me pivotal. As gloom thickened, I mulled in the taxi. Stars akin to remote pyrotechnics equity not bellowed, but gently imposed. The disclosure in the chapel gardens didn't conclude with Lila's theatrical collapse or the intermittent salutes. It served as the spark, initiating a domino effect that cascaded through the reception like reverberations from a remote detonation. The ambiance, previously punctuated by the gentle clink of cutlery and subdued toasts, now pulsed with a transformed vitality electrified, anticipatory, as if the whole assembly had been abruptly diverted mid-course. I positioned myself amid the ivy-laced arbors, my dress uniform evolving from protective gear to a focal point, attracting scrutinizing gazes from across the verdant expanse. Ethan maintained his station beside me, his stance rigid as ever, a seal's poise evident even in this non-combat disarray. He offered no instant commentary, but his proximity conveyed solidarity, the tacit alliance of operatives synced in a high-pressure scenario. Attendees emerged from their initial stupor, commencing with murmurs that escalated into cautious engagements. A cadre of seasoned gentlemen, their attire subtly accented with service emblems, converged on us like a reconnaissance unit probing forward. One, a robust figure with a salt and pepper beard and a timbre roughened by decades of issuing directives, extended a palm. "Colonel Donovan," he articulated. Clasp sturdy and weathered. Served with the third of March Inns in Vietnam. Yemen accounts reached us. Exemplary command. I reciprocated the grip, inclining affirmatively. "Appreciated, sir." We all confront identical conflicts ultimately. Additional encounters ensued. A former Green Beret recounting a brief tale of collaborative missions in the Horn of Africa. A retired analyst lauding the tactical finesse of Operation Silent Wave. Their narratives interlaced a fabric of mutual endurance, underscoring that transcending familial veneers existed a more extensive fraternity and sorority that comprehended the gravity of the insignia. Lila, concurrently, had been escorted to an adjacent settee by her attendants, a swirl of anxious expressions and fluttering palms dispensing hydration and consolations. She uprighted herself presently, hue gradually restoring to her features. Yet her bridal luminescence, the effulgence that had dominated the venue earlier, had waned to a mere glimmer. She evaded my line of sight wholly, concentrating on fidgeting with her fresh matrimonial band, her veil now resembling a crumpled ensign. Ethan cast periodic looks her direction, his visage a fusion of solicitude and determination, yet he refrained from vacating his position adjacent to me. "Adaptation is underway," he whispered during a momentary respite. "Afford it duration." I arched a brow. Duration? We've endured over a decade of communication blackout. "This isn't a postponed relay," he conceded with a nod. Acknowledged. Yet tonight represents a trajectory adjustment for everyone involved. Patricia Mom navigated the fringes like a crisis manager in an operations hub, her contrived vivacity a slender overlay atop escalating alarm. She darted between clusters, contacting limbs, proffering chuckles that echoed vacuous, redirecting discourses toward innocuous territories. The exquisite botanical displays procured from regional cultivators, the chapel's fabled role as a migratory haven, the assurance of nocturnal pyrotechnics above the lakefront. But attentions tracked me instead, the storyline eluding her dominion like vapor dispersing. At one juncture, she neared our improvised assembly, her grin taut, pearls gripped as if for stability. "Clara, darling," she voiced, modulated for proximate auditors, perhaps disperse individually sustain emphasis on the joyous duo. It constituted an edict veiled as proposal, the identical strategy she'd deployed at Dad's commemoration, marginalize the discordant component. I confronted her steadily. The emphasis redirected autonomously, "Patricia. I'm merely present." She hesitated, seeking backing from Ethan, but he preserved impartiality, a mute spectator in the domestic skirmish. As the ensemble shifted to lively swing tunes, prompting duos onto the dance surface, the current genuinely pivoted. Further salutes materialized not solely from the armed forces contingent, but from laypersons stirred by the instant. A lady in her 50s, graceful in emerald chiffon, advanced with glistening orbs. "My nephew deployed to Syria," she divulged. "Suffered a concussion from artillery. Figures like you instill optimism." I attended, extending subdued compassion. The interaction, a cue that my account echoed beyond individual feuds. Ethan managed inquiries regarding our mutual chronicle, narrating the 2018 Yemen incursion with calibrated specificity. The fortified outpost under assault. Adversarial barrages immobilizing his squad. My helo contingent's audacious nocturnal descents through turbulence to furnish extraction. Colonel Donovan didn't merely orchestrate, he accentuated to an engrossed circle. She piloted Vanguard, absorbed impacts to her craft, and nonetheless evacuated us. Valor isn't innate, it's forged in trial. His utterances bore significance, metamorphosing the reception from matrimonial festivity to an extemporaneous homage. Yet amidst the validations, recollections ascended unsolicited, drawing me rearward to the undercurrents that had culminated here. I withdrew momentarily to the garden's boundary, where a marble fountain gurgled softly beneath lunar illumination, the cascade's cadence mirroring the consistent throb of turbines in my reminiscence. Dad's commemoration 11 years prior replayed vividly. The Chicago Memorial Hall, casket focal like an accolade, kin-staging images while I lingered in obscurity, recent from an insertion, my uniform pristine but spirit abraded. Patricia had coordinated that as well, a void overshadowing the morning, she'd murmured. Lila, scarcely beyond adolescence, had tittered concerning my insignia fixation. No interrogations about the operations, the casualties, the understated gallantry that sustained me airborne. That muteness had protracted into years, a sustained pattern of disconnection I'd embraced until this summons disrupted it. Now, the pattern was overturned, the authority equilibrium inverted via a solitary homage. Rejoining the melee, I encountered Lila for the initial occasion since the mic tumble. She had ventured from her refuge, Ethan supporting her elbow, her strides tentative as if traversing a hazard zone. The throng parted subtly, perceiving the strain. "Clara," she uttered, timbre a delicate filament, gaze averted. I lacked awareness. Regarding Yemen, Ethan never disclosed. It wasn't contrition, more an evasion, yet there existed a breach in her demeanor, a fragility I'd seldom witnessed in the sibling who'd perpetually claimed the family's limelight. I appraised her steadily. Awareness wouldn't have altered the taunts, Lila. Paper pusher? Family embarrassment? Those weren't factual. They were selections. She recoiled, glancing at Ethan, who provided a subtle nod of motivation. It was merely levity. To ease the atmosphere. Her justification rang empty, like a defective altimeter. Levity at another's cost isn't easing, it's armament. She assented faintly, withdrawing sans additional utterance, the exchange a minor conquest, not in dominance, but in demarcation. The twilight diminished under a canopy of luminescence, stars flickering like remote radar echoes. As participants commenced departures, Patricia intercepted me in the chapel's vaulted corridor, distant from inquisitive views. Her adornments removed, cosmetics diminishing, yet her bearing adhered like a lifeline. "You've proclaimed yourself rather effectively," she remarked, attempting a sardonic curve. I proffered not, permitting the hush to exert pressure. She interlaced her fingers, pearls now entwined around her digits. Inquiries abound now from participants, even a local scribe who overheard. Photographs disseminating. A succinct elucidation could rectify, for the lineage's benefit. The plea was transparent. Preserve the portrayal. I affixed her with an even stare. Rectify what? The chronicle you fabricated by excising me? That my vocation was diminished to admin for simplicity? Her bearing splintered, orbs glistening. We weren't primed for all this. Your sphere appeared so remote. We overlooked the profundity. You didn't overlook. Apathy dominated. I rebutted. Disregard was the election. She diverted her gaze. It wasn't targeted, Clara. That's the essence it should have been. Kinship is targeted. She lapsed into silence. I didn't await penitence unlikely to emerge. Pivoting, I lingered at the portal. Patricia, I've traversed tempests unaccompanied for half my existence to accommodate your serenity. That chapter terminates tonight. Departing beneath the stars, Chicago's illuminations blurred afar like waning beacons on a nocturnal maneuver, indicators of termination. In the ensuing weeks, the nuptial's repercussions extended past that enclave. Media fragments surfaced, regional publications featuring segments on concealed valor at kin gatherings, nameless tips tracing to the event. I reverted to Quantico, resuming responsibilities with refreshed lucidity, but the occurrence spurred transformation. 3 months subsequent, I addressed a colloquium at the Pentagon's expansive hall. In bespoke attire, sans adornments, I seized the podium and voiced certainties long muted. We arm our contingents against external perils, I initiated, timbre resolute over the amplification. But what of the intrinsic ones? Treacheries not from opponents, but from domestic fronts, belittlings, derisions, obliterations that lacerate deeper than fragments. Attendees inclined, narratives of their own emerging in whispers. I unveiled the Vanguard Network, a nationwide sanctuary for personnel compromised domestically. Collaborations with VA divisions and nonprofits emphasized sentimental surveillance remediation for shattered confidence. Seminars on reconstructing severed ties. Provisions for countering seclusion from kin, companions, roots. The betrayal's mark isn't invariably corporeal, I confirmed. It's the corrosion of backing where it ought to be most robust. We must confront it directly. The inauguration elicited ovation, coverage prioritizing restoration over spectacle. I underscored cohesion. This concerns not accusation, it's about bolstering our formations internally. No explicit references to Lila or Patricia. The press bridged voids Colonel's matrimonial disclosure ignites support movement. I permitted it to propagate, a stream evolving into a torrent. Retirement ensued fluidly, no spectacle, merely a ceremonial transition and relocation to a ranch in Montana's Rocky Mountains, where vast expanses extended like perpetual trajectories. There, amidst undulating terrains and murmuring evergreens, I rediscovered drafting. Graphite depictions of helos cleaving gales, panoramas of frost-tipped summits that mirrored the tenacity I'd cultivated. No partitions adorned with accolades. Rather, a rudimentary atelier with organic illumination. A venue for unaltered self-articulation. One vivid autumn morn, a vicinity herdsman arrived with provisions and intrigue. "Rumor has it you're a colonel," he observed, surveying my canvas. I prepared brew and imparted excerpts. The incursions, the nuptial pivot, the framework birthed from individual strife. Accurate sufficient, I responded. Yet the authentic duty is remaining upright when the terrain quakes. He departed contemplatively, leaving me to the immense Montana vista. Patricia never tendered remorse. Lila persisted aloof. But accounts filtered nuanced alterations in how they pronounced my name, with intermission and emergent regard. Not from sudden warmth, but from the unavoidable verity. Obliteration was no longer viable. That constituted the muted triumph, shaped in shadows now dispelled by radiance. The rehearsal at the West Loop loft had amplified the subterranean flows. The site radiated metropolitan elegance, sweeping outlooks of the radiant skyline, tendrils on rafters like regimented files. Sundown gilded all, but the cordiality bypassed me utterly. At the posterior table, I witnessed the ceremony's toasts infused with insider quips, chronicles that adeptly circumvented my arc. When Lila chronicled Kintails, she bypassed my induction, portraying it as Clara's diversion. Titters followed, yet the general's earlier probe endured, sowing dubiety. Post-repast, under the gentle radiance, Ethan neared covertly. "Colonel," he voiced softly, eyes conveying profundities. "Unforeseen attendance." The call arrived. He bowed. Appreciation for Yemen. Trajectory altering. Prior to elaboration, Lila summoned him. The dialogue, brief, suggested rifts under the luster. Dawn introduced the frenzy of arrangements. I garbed in dress blues, ingressed the chapel amid fragrances and overtures. Row 15 functioned as exile, yet I upheld carriage. As vows were bartered, Ethan's understated nod amid the band right conveyed tacit gratitude within the orchestrated romance. The garden reception highlighted my isolation until the mic demolished illusions. Lila's jabs landed like suppressive bursts, Patricia's backing the subsequent salvo. My rise was calibrated, Ethan's advanced the crux, his salute flawless, declaration echoing. Salutes surged like contingent amalgamation. In the following intervals, whispers morphed to endorsements. Homages from veterans, grips from civilians. The loft's prior sophistication now framed a fresh narrative. Me, central. As dusk intensified, I reflected in the cab. Stars resembling distant flares, justice not shouted, but softly enforced. The months succeeding Lila's nuptials wove into a mosaic of evolutions, akin to the fluctuating atmospheric patterns I'd scrutinized during extended surveillance sorties, seemingly erratic superficially, yet directed by subterranean flows that unveiled themselves with endurance and viewpoint. Retirement hadn't manifested as an abrupt touchdown. It was a progressive glide, engineered with the identical scrupulous orchestration I'd employed for operational blueprints across the years. Following the colloquium at the Pentagon, where I'd introduced the Vanguard network to an auditorium teeming with prospective collaborators, I transferred my leadership responsibilities in an understated ritual at Marine Corps Base Quantico. No elaborate processions or aerial displays, merely a convocation of reliable associates, several clasps, and a gesture toward the forthcoming expanse. My aide, a keen young lieutenant who'd accompanied me through innumerable sessions, seized my hand resolutely. "The arenas won't mirror without you, Colonel," he stated, timbre firm yet infused with authentic esteem. I offered a subtle grin. "They'll adapt, as will I." Archiving my workspace resembled cataloging an existence. Dossiers on engagements from Yemen to cooperative drills in the Indo-Pacific, accolades stowed in cartons beside intimate relics, a weathered snapshot of Dad in his Army era, a chronometer from my inaugural command insertion. The relocation to Montana's Rocky Mountains was intentional, selected for its seclusion and untamed splendor, distant from Chicago's urban fog or Quantico's tactical rigor. The ranch I procured was unassuming, a timber edifice nestled amid lofty firs, with an encircling veranda surveying an immaculate valley that echoed the seasonal shifts like a dynamic tableau. No opulent domain. Sufficient area for isolation. With a modest atelier for drafting and a cast-iron furnace that snapped like remote ordnance on brisk twilights. Arriving in late summer, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows in vibrant arrays, I unpacked systematically, volumes on military strategy arrayed on ledges, my drafting station sited by the broadest pane to seize the western radiance. The uniform resided in the wardrobe, An artifact now, its hues slightly mellowed from years of duty, but still harboring the phantoms of campaigns past. Existence in Montana coalesced into a cadence that paralleled the serene regimen of pre-mission calibrations dawns initiated with robust brew on the veranda, observing fog ascend from the brook as eagles wheeled overhead. I recommenced drafting with an ardor absent since boot camp days. Graphite portrayals of helos navigating tempests, topographies seizing the jagged crests of the Bitterroot Range, conceptual works delving the interplay of shadow and luminescence in a forward base. It was restorative, a means to metabolize the intangible blemishes no commendation could validate. Afternoons frequently entailed treks along paths that snaked through thick woodlands, my footwear grinding on pebble trails, the atmosphere crisp with the essence of resin and soil. These excursions paralleled tactical reconnaissance, deliberate paces, sweeping vistas from pinnacles where I could oversee the landscape like an aerial survey. No haste, no timelines, merely the liberty to respire sans the burden of oversight. Communications commenced filtering in shortly post the Vanguard's inception, not from kin as I might have partially anticipated in transient instants of hopefulness, but from advocates nationwide. Electronic missives from veterans entities commending the scheme's emphasis on domestic lesions, epistles from personnel recounting sagas that paralleled mine home disjunctions that magnified the seclusion of assignments. One account distinguished itself, delivered via registered post from a Marine in California. A youthful sergeant, estranged by his guardians after a PTSD disclosure post. Tour, discovering solace in Vanguard's remedial sessions. Your matrimonial narrative circulated in our networks, he inscribed. Script resolute yet sincere. It bestowed me the fortitude to reconstruct links. Not all restored, but I'm no longer operating independently. I perused it by the hearth one dusk, blazes casting silhouettes on the panels, and sensed a subdued affirmation. Vanguard had expanded beyond my preliminary conception, branches proliferating in key metropolises like San Antonio, Philadelphia, and Portland, proffering not solely therapy but reconciliation forums, juridical assistance for entitlements disputes, and peer grids that nurtured the fellowship often forfeited in civilian spheres. Media curiosity endured in surges, pieces delineating my vocation's trajectory from the valor of Operation Silent Wave, where my helo wing's exact insertions had extricated Ethan's SEAL contingent amid swirling gales and adversarial salvos to my ascent as an advocacy vanguard. Publications like USA Today and Leatherneck magazine published profiles. From extraction to empowerment. Colonel Donovan champions. Unseen struggles at home. I conceded a handful of remote dialogues, underscoring the network's nucleus. Duty doesn't cease at the frontier. The profoundest menaces can emanate from our own formations, familial belittlings that corrode spirit like rust on a chassis. Vanguard outfits us to mend and fortify. No dramatization from me. I circumvented individual anecdotes about the nuptials, permitting communal narratives to morph organically. Lila and Patricia lingered as mute apparitions in this fresh phase, no communications, no correspondence, merely resonances via shared contacts. A relative alluded at a kin assembly that Patricia had redirected her benevolence toward veteran initiatives, organizing benefits with a renewed accent on domestic warriors. Lila's digital presence, glimpsed once through an impartial query, displayed tempered updates, musings on self-evolution interspersed with post-honeymoon images, her bridal sheen moderated by contemplation. It wasn't rapprochement, but a readjustment, a tacit recognition that my existence could no longer be expunged. Winter blanketed Montana with a tender severity, sheathing the terrain in frost that muted the globe like dampening in a simulator. I acclimated effortlessly. Crampons for paths, a dynamo purring steadfastly during gales, eaves devoted to Vanguard dossiers by lantern glow. One tempestuous midday, as flurries whirled like countermeasures, a local herdsman named Hank rapped on my portal with a load of firewood and staples. He'd evolved into a quasi-regular caller, lured by tales of the retired colonel in the wilds. "Heard you're the genuine article," he remarked, stamping snow from his boots on the stoop. Lead extractions in Yemen? I welcomed him for brew, the ranch warm with the aroma of timber and percolating grounds. Among others, I verified, dispensing a cup. But designations diminish. It's the steadfastness that prevails. We conversed for hours, his land stewardship yarns echoing my engagements, safeguarding acreage from intrusions, steering administrative tempests. He divulged a personal kin schism, reconciled tardily, and inquired mine. I proffered glimpses. The nuptials pivot. The salutes that dismantled delusions. The network spawned from individual upheaval. Equity isn't perpetually a resounding penance, I pondered, gazing at the blizzard beyond the pain. Occasionally it's the nuanced alteration in how your designation is voiced with interlude, with calibration. As vernal thaw liberated the streams and sprouts emerged on limbs, Vanguard's influence deepened. A collaboration with the VA broadened assets, digital gateways for nameless sharing, roving units visiting installations to tackle familial undermining pre-escalation. Accounts inundated a sailor reconstructing with siblings post years of derision, a guardsman attaining closure after separation via facilitated arbitrations. One occasion distinguished, a digital conference where I facilitated discussions on tenacity, personnel from varied branches narrating domestic clashes. Colonel Donovan demonstrated that hush isn't capitulation. One contributor voiced, her timbre crackling over the connection. It resonated my own progression from the marginalized attendee at Dad's commemoration to the fulcrum of transformation at Lila's vows. That abyss had become my launch pad. The ridicule a spark. Ethan's homage the ignition. The torrent of acknowledgement the propulsion advancing me. Kin interactions orbited marginally now. No longer the gravitational tug they'd once exerted. Whispers arrived Patricia participating in a Vanguard benefit anonymously. Lila volunteering at a regional vets hub. No overt gestures, but the recalibration was palpable. Esteem garnered through detachment, a subdued fairness where my chronicles stood unaltered. In the ranch, amid the harmony of vernal precipitation on the metal canopy, I contemplated it while drafting a dawn vista, boundless, liberated, wings extended against the ascending orb. Equity, I discerned, wasn't in audible remorse but in this. Remaining resolute in expanses of my selection, where the sole disturbance was the variety I traversed by preference. Sporadic callers interrupted the seclusion, a cadre of recruits from proximate academies, pursuing guidance over rambles, a chronicler authoring a dossier on females in special ops, her probes incisive yet deferential. How do you harmonize kin disloyalty with individual victory? She queried one midday by the brook, ledger and grasp. I halted, observing a hawk glide aloft. Harmony isn't invariably reciprocal. Victory stems from recharting your course distant from their gales, toward your own serene ether. She assented, jotting vigorously, and the article subsequently appeared in a nationwide periodical, amplifying Vanguard's scope. As autumn recurred, tinting the ranges in blazing tones, I organized a modest symposium at the ranch. Vanguard coordinators, ideating expansions transnational divisions for Confederate forces, applications for instantaneous aid. Merriment resonated on the veranda, tactics plotted like engagement schemes. Amidst, a missive from an unforeseen origin. Ethan, stamped from his fresh assignment in North Carolina. Colonel, it initiated formally, then mellowed. Lila and I are charting our own vistas. Your network motivated us engaging in sessions, acquiring to heed. Gratitude for the redirection. No allusion to regrets, but a span proffered. I responded concisely. Unobstructed paths forward. Navigate authentically. Winter's reappearance brought rumination. Frost isolating the realm as I drafted by fireglow. Lila's nuptials, once a lesion, now cicatrized into potency, a prompt that unfettered expanses await those who assert them. Mom's domain, once prevailing, waned to a remote luminary. Mine blazed vivid, wings perennial.